She got kicked out of pilot school for failing a test right after scoring higher than the instructor. Then Karen from the HOA tried to tow her truck for being emotionally aggressive. Big mistake. Because 3 days later, that same girl hijacked a $150 million 0-cent jet and outflew the Air Force's Golden Boy, using skills she learned crop dusting cornfields. This isn't a comeback story. This is what happens when you try to clip the wrong girl's wing. They called her name like they were announcing a weather alert. Kate Avery Lane, front and center. The voice shot through the loudspeaker with surgical precision, slicing through the early morning haze over Fort Brand Aviation Academy. Every head turned. Some squinted, a few smirked. In a formation of 200 cadets dressed in spotless fatigues, Avery stood out like dirt on marble. She stepped forward, her boots coated with dry prairie dust, a byproduct of parking her pickup near the officer's lot. That apparently was infraction number 1. The officer who approached her wasn't just delivering news, he was orchestrating a moment. Captain Mason Caldwell, posture perfect, eyes cold, held out a sealed envelope with the kind of smile that suggested he'd been waiting for this moment all week. You are hereby dismissed from further participation in the Advanced Tactical Flight Program. Effective immediately. Gasps. A muttered, holy hell from somewhere in the third row. Then laughter from Cadet Weston, the son of a 2-star general, who leaned over to his buddy and whispered, "Guess the chicken coop doesn't raise falcons after all." Avery didn't flinch. Her green eye scanned Mason's face for any hint of explanation. None came. Just that awful bureaucratic blankness. She saluted with perfect form, turned, and walked off the flat line with the world watching. Behind her, formation resumed, and just like that, she was erased. No trial, no defense, no your side of the story. Just a quiet farm girl, dismissed and disposable. As she passed the outer gate, a sharp voice cut the air again, but this time it wasn't military. "Excuse me, Miss Lane." Avery turned to see a woman storming toward her, heels clacking on concrete. Blonde bob, aviator shades, clipboard, HOA badge. "Of course. I've told you before," the woman snapped, jabbing a finger toward Avery's battered Ford pickup. "That vehicle does not meet the Fort Brant officer housing visual standard. Rust and non-regulation tire width violate Rule 14B. Either move it or I'll have it towed at your expense." Avery stared at her like she was speaking Martian. "I've just been discharged." But Karen looked unimpressed. "Then you should have parked it near the enlisted side. This is a military community, not a county fair." The gate guard watching the whole thing said nothing. Avery just nodded once, bit her lip, and walked on, past the gate, past the truck, past the low hum of jet engines that used to make her heart race with possibility. She didn't cry, not in front of them. But as she reached the edge of the empty maintenance lot where her father used to tinker with old engines before the academy bulldozed half the hangars, Avery sat on a discarded toolbox and opened the envelope. One page. Dismissal. No reason, no chance to appeal, no record of her flawless sim scores, no mention of her father, Captain Eli Lane, former test pilot, fallen in a crash the academy still labeled pilot error, even though the maintenance report from that day mysteriously vanished. A gust of wind caught the edge of the page, nearly carrying it off. She didn't stop it, let the damn thing fly. Instead, she reached inside her jacket and pulled out a small silver wing pin, worn smooth by time, her father's. She ran her thumb along its edge, feeling the indentation where the name had been rubbed down. She had been 12 when he taught her to fly in a beat-up biplane over fields of golden wheat. "You feel the sky, kid," he used to say. "Don't fly it, become it." Now that dream had crashed twice, once with him and once today. But what the academy didn't know, what Karen with the clipboard didn't know, what Mason Caldwell really didn't want anyone to know was that there was one simulator, one file, one aircraft off books, hidden behind a firewall in a system no one had thought to erase, and one man, the last man who still believed in, turns out even humiliation has a maintenance schedule. Avery sat alone behind Hangar 9, where the air still smelled faintly of jet fuel and rusted ambition. That's when she heard the familiar creak of steel-tooled boots and the low cough of someone who'd been breathing too much turbine smoke. Tech Sergeant Nick Morales appeared, carrying a battered thermos and an expression that said he'd seen worse, but only just barely. "They really pulled your ticket, huh?" he muttered, sitting beside her like it was the most natural thing in the world. Avery didn't look at him. Didn't even let me finish my protein bar. Morales chuckled, a rough sound like gravel in a coffee grinder. You know, they tried to kick me off base for installing a fan in my toolbox. Fire hazard, they said. He popped open the thermos, took a swig, and offered it to her. Avery shook her head. I think the clipboard lady's planning to measure the circumference of my tires next. Oh, Karen from Officer Housing? Morales nodded, saying, last week she filed a complaint that the pigeons on my roof weren't aesthetically aligned. Swear to God. He glanced at her sideways. But this isn't just regulation nonsense. This is Caldwell. That made Avery turn. You think he orchestrated this? Morales snorted. I know he did. You're too talented for him to tolerate. Your sim scores have been through the roof. But you notice how every time you got to evaluation phase, something glitched? Avery remembered. Autopilot kicking in when it shouldn't. Altitude readings off by hundreds of feet. Once, her entire HUD blacked out mid-combat sim, but the Academy always shrugged it off as software calibration, and she had no proof. Morales dug into his utility vest and pulled out a flash drive. I do. Inside the drive was a recording from just 2 nights earlier. Avery in the F-22 simulator, completing an advanced dogfight scenario with 98.7% efficiency. The system marked it as a fail, Morales said, because someone flipped the parameters mid-run. But I logged the raw data before it got scrubbed. I've been doing this long enough to know when sabotage smells like jet fuel. Avery stared at the footage. Her hands moved across the controls with surgical grace, reacting faster than the sim could predict. Why are you helping me? She asked, finally. Morales leaned back, eyes narrowing. Because I served with your dad. And because Caldwell did the same crap to him, only back then nobody spoke up. Avery clenched her jaw. She remembered the day her father's crash report disappeared from the Academy archive. One day it was a mechanical failure, the next, pilot error. Case closed, career erased. That was the moment she realized systems didn't fail, people did, especially the ones with stars on their collars. Morales stood, cracked his neck, and handed her the drive. There's something else. 3 days from now, there's a showcase. Big brass from D.C. flying in to watch Caldwell strut in the new Raptor. FX-21, same model your dad used to test. He paused, waiting for her reaction. What if you flew it first? Avery's heart slammed against her ribs. You mean steal it? Not steal, Morales corrected. Demonstrate. There's a difference. One ends with you in handcuffs, the other ends with someone in his. But Avery wasn't listening anymore. Her eyes had drifted to the skyline beyond the fence, where the sun dipped low, casting copper light over rows of grounded aircraft. It wasn't just about clearing her name anymore. It was about rewriting the ending to a story someone else tried to bury. And somewhere just beyond that horizon, or maybe within the dark folds of an unguarded hangar, was the aircraft that carried her father's call sign, a relic with a pulse, a machine waiting to remember who it belonged to. That night, Avery didn't sleep, not from fear, that would come later, but from remembering. You'd be amazed how loud memories can get when the rest of the base finally shuts up. Somewhere between 2 a.m. and regret, she found herself parked in the shadow of a long-abandoned control tower, staring at the stars the way she used to stare at her dad's oil-stained flight manuals. If Morales was right, and deep down she knew he was, then the only thing standing between truth and oblivion was whether she could fly like she was born to, not programmed to. Back when she was 12, she didn't learn to fly from instructors, she learned from the sky. Her dad, Captain Eli Lane, didn't just hand her the controls of his vintage biplane, he handed her an entire language, how to feel vibration through the stick before the engine coughed, how to read crosswinds by the way wheat leaned under it, how to diagnose a fuel line leak from the scent of vapor before instruments ever caught up. Flying isn't numbers, he used to say. It's rhythm, it's breath. You don't beat gravity, you learn to dance with it. Avery was his best student, and his last. The summer she turned 16, a corporate pilot nearly crash-landed his twin-gen Piper near their farm. The radio was out. The landing gear jammed halfway. The guy panicked. Avery, still in jeans and covered in grease, borrowed a neighbor's CB radio and talked him down. Using tractor terms, the guy offered her a full scholarship to Embry-Riddle. She declined. If it ain't earned, it ain't yours, she'd said, a line Morales would later quote back to her like scripture. At the academy, she tried to hide that part of herself. She played by the rules, filled out the forms, swallowed her instincts. The instructors called her quiet but inconsistent, never realizing they were only ever testing the surface. What they didn't see were the late nights she spent in the hangars, fixing balance weights nobody asked her to fix, recalibrating gyros the techs had forgotten. The sim instructors had once been baffled when an overheating rudder axis cooled mid-maneuver. Avery had wrapped the external panel with freezer gel packs and didn't say a word. That's not regulation, one of them grunted. Neither is surviving a spin-out at Mach 1, she muttered under her breath. The next afternoon, Morales gave her a time and a door code, the back of Hangar 3, the sim room buried under decades of unused flight tech and forgotten chairs. 2 hours, he said, and don't crash. The system logs everything, even ghosts. The door hissed open like it hadn't in years, and there it was, a full motion Raptor simulator, decommissioned but still functional. The screen blinked once like it recognized her. Avery slid into the seat. It wasn't comfortable. It was home. The smell of heated plastic, the resistance of the throttle, the weight of the stick. It was like shaking hands with an old friend who still remembered your birthday. The HUD flickered alive as she powered through pre-flight. The call sign on the interface read Coleman_1. Her father's aircraft. The one they said he failed in. The one Morales said Caldwell had sabotaged. She exhaled slow, then grabbed the stick. Let's see what ghosts remember, she whispered. The simulator roared to life. The first time Avery crashed the simulator, she wasn't even mad. The Raptor's feedback system was twitchier than she remembered. The yaw control behaved like a caffeinated squirrel. But the second attempt, she hit 92% completion on a high-speed descent that usually gave cadets nosebleeds. By the third run, the system stopped blinking red and started humming like it approved. Morales watched the monitor outside, muttering, "She's flying like she owes God rent." At exactly 22:43, the door creaked open again. This time, it wasn't Morales. It was Lieutenant Jada Monroe, head of campus operations and rumored to have broken 3 ribs in a dogfight just to finish her certification flight. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, arms crossed, watching Avery pull the Raptor into a perfect inverted stall recovery. Then, without warning, she shut the sim down mid-loop. Avery tore off her headset, ready to fight. "Nice technique," Monroe said flatly. "Shame it's illegal." Avery braced for handcuffs. Instead, Monroe pulled out her phone and hit play. It was security cam footage, grainy but clear, showing Captain Caldwell entering the sim override room at 3:12 a.m. The same night Avery's failures were logged. He's been adjusting the AI parameters, tailoring fail conditions. This wasn't incompetence, it was assassination by keyboard, Monroe said. And I hate dirty pilots. They moved to Monroe's office, dimly lit with an ancient ceiling fan that creaked like it was giving a speech. "So, what now?" Avery asked. Monroe handed her a folded flight roster. "Friday's demo is loaded with cadets from Senator Nichols' re-election donors. Guess who Caldwell's showcasing? Not skill, legacy." She poured herself a cup of vending machine coffee and added exactly 1 sugar. But if someone with inconvenient talent showed up uninvited, that's not a problem, that's a headline. "You want me to hijack the Pentagon demo to make a point?" Avery blinked. Monroe sipped her coffee. Hijack is such a dramatic word. Think of it as aggressive correction. Before Avery could respond, there was a knock at the door. In walked Cadet Ryan Mercer, all perfect hair and 2 clean boots. Avery stiffened. "Isn't he one of Caldwell's golden boys?" she whispered. Monroe rolled her eyes. "Used to be." But Ryan saw something that changed his mind. "Go ahead, Mercer." Ryan stepped forward and set a printed schematic on the table. A maintenance log for the FX-21 Raptor, the exact one Caldwell would fly. "I saw him swap the diagnostics panel. It looks the same, but he's using a ghost interface to feed fake readings to the system." He looked at Avery. "That plane isn't just rigged to fly better. It's rigged to make you look reckless if you tried to use it." Avery stared at the paper. The flight log had been signed with an alias. T. Keller. Morales had once told her that Caldwell's original call sign before his promotion was Keller. So the demo's a setup? Avery said. He wants to humiliate me again, but this time on national defense camera? Monroe nodded. Unless we flip the script? She tapped the desk. We use the ghost interface against him. Let him fly the tweaked version. We feed the real diagnostics to you. You fly the raw bird. If you outmaneuver him with the base model, no one can call it a fluke. Avery looked between Monroe and Mercer. That plan depends on a lot of things going perfectly. Monroe smiled, a bit too calmly. No, it depends on Caldwell being exactly the overconfident jerk I know he is. Outside, storm clouds began stacking over the horizon like judgment in slow motion. In the distance, a Karen from base housing was arguing with a lawn maintenance robot because its clippings had crossed a property line. It beeped in defense. She screamed back. Inside, Avery folded the schematic, pocketed it, and finally smiled. All right, she said, let's cause a little turbulence. There are two types of missions in the military, the ones you brag about on plaques and the ones nobody will ever admit happen. This was very much the latter. Avery waited until 300 hours, the dead zone between the last training sim and the first caffeine-fueled scramble of day shift. Her boots hit the tarmac silent as regret. Morales had given her a forged access badge. Monroe had scrubbed her from the base activity logs for exactly 43 minutes, and Mercer had quietly redirected 2 security patrols with a fake report about a suspicious raccoon on the airstrip, which, fun fact, turned out to be real. The real challenge wasn't the security, it was Karen, specifically HOA liaison Patricia Kensington, who had apparently decided 3 a.m. was the ideal time to survey the neighborhood for light pollution violations. Avery crouched behind a shipping container as Patricia circled with a clipboard and flashlight, scolding a motion sensor for being too emotionally reactive. When the woman turned to reprimand a parked truck for emitting Republican vibes, Avery slipped into hangar 6 like a rumor. Inside, Morales was already at the auxiliary panel. He didn't look up. If anyone asked, you're inspecting turbine stress on the Raptor's left rudder mount. Does anyone ask that? She whispered. Only if they're trying to flirt. He handed her a flight jumpsuit, modified to look like a technician's suit on the outside, but lined with telemetry tracking modules Monroe had borrowed from the test lab. This'll let Mercer feed you live diagnostics once you're airborne. You'll be flying blind otherwise. Caldwell's custom HUD wipes clean every 2 minutes unless it's on his biometric ID. And let me guess, Avery said, pulling the zipper up. I'm not in his biometric circle of trust. Morales handed her a sleek black band. This'll fake it for 3 minutes, long enough to start the sequence and override the auto wall-up. Just don't sneeze too hard while wearing it. It thinks you're him. Avery slipped into the Raptor's cockpit like it had been molded around her body. Everything felt unnervingly familiar, the same chill in the throttle, the same subtle asymmetry in the joystick grip her dad used to complain about. It was the same model, and the interface still read :1. Outside, Mercer's voice crackled in her earpiece. Okay, I've got a clean channel. FX21's primary feedback loop is still rigged. He's expecting tight turns to respond with 0.6 delay. Morales neutralized that, but be warned, his version will overcorrect, which means if he tries anything flashy, he's going to spin like a ballerina on black ice. Avery smirked. He always did love a dramatic entrance. Morales popped open the side panel of the Raptor, making one final adjustment. You've got 5 minutes before Caldwell does his pre-check. He thinks he's inspecting the plane alone at dawn. You've got until the sky turns pink. And if I'm still in the air when that happens? Morales shrugged. Then you better hope you fly prettier than you lie. Avery exhaled, gripped the throttle, and began the ignition sequence. The cockpit buzzed alive, a low hum that vibrated through her bones. Somewhere beneath her seat was a panel Morales had rewired so the real diagnostics fed directly to her HUD while broadcasting a fault set to base control. They'd see what Caldwell expected right up until he tried to take off and realized someone had beaten him to it. In the corner of the hangar, a small red light blinked once on a maintenance camera. A glitch or something more. Morales spotted it too late. We've got eyes, he muttered. Patchy connection, but someone's logging this. If it's Caldwell's system, he'll know someone touched the Coleman. Avery didn't flinch. She slid her helmet on, voice low and steady. Then it's time to stop touching. Let's move. Upside, the wind picked up, carrying the distant roar of jets waking up for pre-dawn drills. In 30 minutes, Caldwell would walk into this hangar expecting to command the skies. What he didn't know, what he never imagined, was that his hand-picked aircraft had already chosen someone else. Dawn cracked open the horizon like an overripe fruit. Soft orange light spilled across the airstrip as Fort Brandt's VIP grandstand began to fill. Senators, Pentagon officials, ranking officers in full-dress uniform. They sipped black coffee from silver thermoses and adjusted their sunglasses like they were about to watch a tennis match instead of a weapons-grade ballet. Captain Mason Caldwell stood at the center of the lineup, posture crisp, smile smug, waiting for his entrance cue. His plane, the FX-21 Raptor, gleamed behind him like a war trophy. What he didn't know was that the Coleman wasn't there for him anymore. Inside the cockpit, Avery heard her father's voice in her head, steady as ever. Feel the air. Don't fly it. Let it fly through you. The HUD was active. Diagnostics were stable. Mercer's voice crackled in her ear. You're patched in. Telemetry's clean. Tower thinks you're scheduled pre-flight systems check. You got 2 minutes to get airborne before Caldwell gets curious about where his Raptor went. Morales whispered, Do it now, kid, or you'll be explaining this to a court-martial board with a mustache quota. Avery toggled the comm. Tower, this is FX-93 requesting emergency clearance. Engine warning light tripped during overnight diagnostics, requesting takeoff to verify issue under live conditions. A beat of static, then a reply from an operator still half asleep. FX-93, proceed. Runway 3 is yours. She smiled. The best lies were 10% mechanical jargon, 90% sleep deprivation. The Raptor launched down the strip with a roar that sent birds scattering from the light poles. G-forces pressed her into the seat, but Avery didn't flinch. She pulled into a steep climb, flipped the auxiliary nav feed, and immediately began a controlled turn toward the demo zone. On the ground, Caldwell stared at the sky, confused. His Raptor, the one with the ghost interface and fake diagnostics, was already dancing above the clouds. He hit his comm. Tower, confirm status of FX-21. Who the hell is in my jet? A new voice cut in. Crisp, amused, and clearly high-ranking. This is General Sloan. Seems someone decided to warm up your plane for you, Captain. Let's see if they can handle it. Caldwell's jaw clenched. With all due respect, sir, that aircraft is not authorized for demo. Neither was your tampering, Sloan murmured, though only Monroe, listening from a secure line, heard him say it. Caldwell ran to the standby aircraft, but Morales had already delayed fueling protocols. The backups were locked. He was grounded. In the sky, Avery executed a high-gee barrel roll, the Raptor responding like it was meant for her. You seeing this? Mercer asked through the comms. You just ran an inverted drop into a power turn like it was a Sunday drive. Avery grinned. He taught me that in a crop duster. Said turbulence is just the sky's way of flirting. Down below, Caldwell was seething. His grandstanding moment, months in the making, was slipping away with every pass Avery made across the VIP zone. Worse, she wasn't just flying well, she was teaching. Monroe had hijacked the screen feed, broadcasting Avery's real-time telemetry and control inputs. The officials weren't watching a rogue pilot, they were watching a masterclass. And then came the piece de resistance. Avery initiated a high-altitude stall dive, one of the riskiest maneuvers in the program, banned from demos for safety concerns. The Raptor tilted vertical, then dropped like a stone before leveling out inches above the runway, engines howling. People screamed, generals stood, a reporter dropped their camera in awe. From his grounded perch, Caldwell shouted, She's going to kill herself. But she didn't. She rolled out with surgical control, circled once, then locked eyes with the ground camera. Through the glass canopy, she tapped the wings on her chest, the real ones, and saluted. Tower, she said calmly. FX-93 requesting permission to complete the demonstration sequence in honor of Captain Eli Lane. There was a pause. Then General Sloan's voice, firm and reverent. Permission granted, Sparrow. The sky is yours. The moment Avery touched down, everything shifted. Not just the air pressure, not just the crowd's stunned silence, but something deeper, like the base itself exhaled for the first time in years. She taxied the Raptor to the far edge of the runway where Morales waited, expression unreadable, hands buried in his jacket like a man guarding secrets and frostbite. "Not bad for a dirt farmer," he said gruffly. She popped the canopy open, climbed out, and tossed him her helmet. "Your wiring held. The rest was just instinct." They didn't arrest her. That was the first surprise. Instead, 3 black SUVs pulled up. Out stepped General Sloan, 2 Pentagon officials, and trailing behind with a clipboard and the smile of a woman ready to end bloodlines, Karen, Patricia Kensington, HOA liaison, was not pleased. "This entire act violates Airbase Protocol 12B, she snapped. "I want her removed from officer housing records immediately." Sloan didn't even look at her. "Karen, go measure a mailbox." Patricia sputtered, scandalized, then turned on her heel and stormed off, muttering about Asian insubordination and property value depreciation. Inside briefing room 3A, the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Caldwell was already there, arms crossed, glaring like he wanted to file a lawsuit using eye contact. Monroe stood beside him, calm, crisp, iPad in hand. "So," she began, "let's talk about sabotage, falsified records, and the time you almost tanked a legacy pilot's reputation because you were afraid of being upstaged." Caldwell scoffed. "This is absurd. She stole a military aircraft. She endangered lives. She has no authorization." "Actually," Mercer cut in, holding up a signed override form, "she did." The additional document was signed by none other than Lieutenant Monroe and retroactively approved by General Sloan. "Funny thing about chain of command," Monroe said. "It gets really flexible when someone leaks your ghost interface schematics to the Inspector General." Caldwell's face turned a spectacular shade of red. "Those modifications were within performance protocol standards." "Sure," Morales said. "Sue's installing training wheels on a tank doesn't make it combat ready." Then came the twist. Monroe slid a data chip across the table. "What's on that?" Caldwell asked. "The last system report from the Coleman, before your little override. And a backup of the original incident file from Eli Lane's crash. Turns out someone did save a copy, and turns out the same flight pattern irregularities match your ghost interface tampering exactly." Caldwell stood up. "You can't prove I caused that crash." Morales pulled a photo from his pocket, an old faded shot of Caldwell in testing gear standing next to Eli Lane and a young Avery. "No," Morales said, "but we can prove you were the last one to clear that aircraft for flight, and you signed the override on the stabilizer firmware, same firmware you ghosted on FX-21. That's not a mistake. That's a pattern." General Sloan finally spoke. His voice was low but final. "Captain Caldwell, effective immediately, you are relieved of command, pending dishonorable discharge and federal inquiry." Caldwell didn't speak. He didn't move, just stared at the chip on the table like it had betrayed him personally. Behind him, Monroe said, "Don't worry, we'll mail you a certificate of ego fragility." But the real moment, the one no one could fake, came when Sloan turned to Avery. "Miss Lane, while your actions were highly irregular, your performance was exceptional. You reminded us why instinct still matters more than legacy, and why a uniform doesn't equal a conscience." He reached into his coat, pulled out a velvet case, and opened it. Inside, a silver medal glinted. "This belonged to your father. He was posthumously exonerated last month. I was going to mail this, but I think he'd rather you earn it back your own way." Avery took the medal with both hands, her voice cracked just barely. "He always said flight was freedom. I didn't realize he meant freedom from you," she added, eyeing Caldwell one last time. Back outside, Monroe handed her a folded piece of paper. "Your discharge has been rescinded, effective immediately. You're reinstated under probationary commission. And your flight footage? Already viral inside the Air Force network. They're calling you Sparrow One, Caldwell. We're calling Captain Clipwings." Morales chuckled. Even Karen's HOA group voted to ban him from BBQ nights." Across base housing, someone had already printed a meme, a cartoon, Caldwell spinning out midair while Avery calmly flies upside down next to him. Caption, "When the farmer's daughter brings receipts." Karen's face had been photoshopped onto the control tower, yelling at clouds. The system hadn't just broken, it had been exposed, and for the first time, it was listening. 6 months later, the skies over Fort Brant looked different, clearer somehow, like someone had finally wiped the fog off the sun. The flight line buzzed with activity. but the names had changed. Caldwell was gone, stripped of rank and dignity. Morales had been quietly promoted to head of technical operations. Monroe now sat on the Academy's oversight committee, and Patricia Kensington had been reassigned to HOA Historical Archives, which, according to rumor, was just a locked supply closet with a printer that jammed every 20 minutes. Avery Lane stood at the edge of the runway in her newly issued flight suit, silver lieutenant bars gleaming against the matte black fabric. The real kind, earned, not inherited. On her chest sat the restored wing badge of her father, Eli Lane, polished to mirror brightness. Morales walked up beside her, holding a steaming mug of something that might have once been coffee. "Nervous?" he asked. She shook her head. "Already crashed a Legacy and hijacked a military demo. This is just flying." A low whistle echoed down the tarmac as the Coleman Raptor, her father's aircraft restored and refitted, was rolled out of Hangar 4. It bore a new call sign now, Sparrow 1, official, engraved. Not just a nickname anymore. "You know, Karen tried to argue the paint job violated HOA color codes," Morales said. "Said matte gray was visually aggressive." Avery smirked. "You think she's figured out what military planes do yet?" General Sloan gave a short briefing before the flight. "This is a demonstration, not an air show," he reminded the gathered officers. "But if any of you feel the urge to clap, I won't stop you." Then he turned to Avery, lowered his voice. "Make it beautiful, but make it yours." She nodded once and climbed into the cockpit like it was her rightful place. Not just by skill, but by blood. The sky welcomed her like an old friend. She took off with precision, but not stiffness. There was music in her flight, rolls, dives, pivots that weren't flashy, but perfectly timed. It was less a show and more a symphony, everything her father had taught her made manifest. Somewhere in the control tower, an aide asked, "Who's flying that?" And Sloan simply said, "The one who was never supposed to." Halfway through her run, she executed the maneuver that had almost ended Caudle's stall dive, but this time added a twist, flipping into a corkscrew exit and re-entering formation inverted. People watching from the field cheered, despite themselves. Karen, watching from behind a fence post with binoculars and a new clipboard, screamed, "That's not compliant." A bird pooped on her hood. Poetic timing. When Avery landed, the applause was immediate, though informal. Monroe approached first, handed her a folder. "Evaluation complete," she said. "Perfect scores. They had to invent a new grade for one of your transitions. We're calling it the lane correction." Morales clapped her on the shoulder. "You know what the best part is? You didn't win by shouting. You won by flying louder than they ever could." Inside her locker that afternoon, she found the note. No name, just 5 words. She'd be proud. She knew it was Monroe, but somehow it still felt like her dad. That night, Avery walked alone to the field beyond the airstrip. The stars were clear. She held up her father's medal, no longer tarnished, and whispered, I didn't just prove I could fly. I proved you never crashed." The wind shifted like a nod. In the end, she didn't need a parade. She didn't need Caldwell to fall farther. She didn't even need Karen to get banned from base BBQs again, though that part was satisfying. She just needed one truth to survive all the lies. You don't have to be born in the system to beat it. You just have to fly beyond it. Sometimes justice doesn't land in a courtroom. It lands on a runway at 700 miles per hour. Avery Lane didn't scream, beg, or plead. She flew. And in doing so, she reminded us that talent doesn't need permission, and legacy isn't something you inherit, it's something you earn. You can bury the truth for a while, but eventually it grows wings. Whether you've ever been overlooked, silenced, or told you don't belong, remember, the sky doesn't check your resume. It just asks if you're ready to take off. And if someone ever tries to clip your wings, install afterburners. If this story hit you in the gut or gave you goosebumps, drop a comment, share it with a fellow underdog, and don't forget to subscribe for more chaos, karma, and comebacks, because some stories were made to fly.